The Bhagavatam. Today we're going to talk about some very heavy subjects. This is really going to go into the heart of what is known as materialism. We've all grown up in a world where we've been taught that we need to not only survive, not only take care of ourselves or be responsible, but also to prosper, to be wealthy. And we look up to people who are in that position, who have a lot of money, who live in big fancy houses, who drive expensive cars and wear designer clothes. We've been taught, systematically conditioned, that that is the epitome of human life. But really, is it? We've come to accept that pleasure, enjoyment, and happiness are something we will gain by achieving great wealth and fame and reputation. And we do everything we can to avoid pain and hurt and suffering. On this treadmill, we run from one extreme to the other. We find ourselves sometimes feeling hot and then trying to turn on the air conditioning to feel cool. Sometimes feeling sad and then trying to do things to relieve our sadness. Maybe watch a movie, have a drink, or even some drugs. But in our pursuit of happiness, we become like one in a desert chasing a mirage. We follow the herd of people who tell us about follow your dream, follow your heart, which is really about, trying to gain material wealth and abundance, never asking if the ones we emulate are happy. You see, it's not that wealth is either good or bad. It's not that fame is either good or bad. Any more than a knife is either good or bad. It's a thing. And a thing can be used badly and a thing can be used wisely. The question is, how are we using it and what are we being taught? We're being taught that pleasure, happiness is our birthright. And because of that, we must do whatever we can to chase, at least in America they call it, the American dream. And it's time we paused and considered another possibility, because this one sure isn't working. The Bhagavatam points out that all material pursuit is futile. Happiness cannot be found in matter any more than we can find water in the desert or in a rock. But the illusion of this world is so great that even though hundreds of wise and enlightened beings have forewarned us, we are unable to hear them amidst the din of all the people around us on TV, on social media, and amongst our friends and family. We see them on a vacation and we think, I need to be there too. We see them move into a new house and we think, I need to have one too. We see them in these incredible clothes and we think, me too. But getting off the treadmill doesn't mean we have to escape either. Some people do try. They escape into drugs. They escape into religion. They escape into sensual pleasures. None of these work either. I don't know if you've noticed, but they're often a very steep slope leading people on a very destructive path. There, in fact, is no escape. You cannot get out of one nightmare by starting another dream. The solution is to wake up, to understand the strands of the web, the matrix that holds us in its grip. This part of the Bhagavatam that we're about to read right now is the teachings of Jad Bharat, and it is a heavy dose of wake-up medicine. Enter only if you dare to hear the truth spoken without mincing words. If you dare to hear the truth as it is, stark, naked, and absolutely raw. Join us on this grand adventure into the ancient wisdom of the Vedas, which were revealed to us through the wisest people that ever lived on this planet. So the Bhagavatam. In this, we've been hearing about Jad Bharat in the last few episodes. Jad Bharat was a self-realized soul. What does that mean? It means he had realized Brahman, the absolute truth, which in the Vedas they say is Tat Tvam Asi. You are that. Meaning you are a spark of that divine being. You are a spark of God. You are a God-like being. Doesn't mean you're God. Anyways, he was a self-realized soul. The self is that soul. The self is that spark. And he had realized it. Realized it means he was living from that place. He had not only made contact with the soul, but he had learned how to live from there. Most of us, we don't live from our soul. We live from our ego. We live from our mind. Our mind and ego dictate, or rather, I should say, our mind, ego, and senses dictate what we need to do. We are, if I may dare say, puppets of our mind, our senses, and our ego. If they tell us, I want to eat something, we go and look for that. If they want something sweet, then that is it. If they want sex, then that is it. If they want some nice thing to buy so that we can impress the world, and look cool, then that's what we're going to do. We will follow the dictates of our master who lives within us right here. At all costs, we will do whatever it takes. Of course, society does teach us how to regulate ourselves a bit, or we'd be absolutely crazy. And to some degree, we've learned to tone down our desires. But if we had our way, we'd go for everything and anything. And some people do. So Jad Bharat was a self-realized soul. He had realized not the small self of the ego, but the big self, meaning the soul. Now, in Vedic times, it was that a person who is enlightened, a person who is self-realized, a person who has understood Brahman meaning the energy of the divine, the energy of God that is present everywhere. One who has realized this, one who experienced this, one who feels this, is considered the highest person on the planet. And even if this person is like Jad Bharat, who is walking around practically with nothing on, just a little cloth around his waist and dirty, filthy, matted hair, he chose to be that way because he didn't want to get entangled in the world. He didn't want to impress anybody. He didn't want to show anyone how cool he was. He just wanted to be left alone. So this is a term in Sanskrit referred to as the avadhut. And that was Jad Bharat. I'm just going to call him Jad from now on, just to make it simple for you. Now, he'd been, as I said, people thought he was crazy, and this particular king, Rahugana, had asked him to carry his palanquin, and when he wasn't carrying it properly, when Jad was kind of like stepping around so that he wouldn't step on ants, and when the whole palanquin was wobbling, there's 4 people carrying a palanquin, and even one of them, if they're not steady, the palanquin gets pretty rocky, and the king got really angry and yelled at him, at which point Jad started really laying it on to him, and telling him the truth, which he actually not as he used to act as he was dumb all those years of his life. But finally, this was his opportunity to speak up, and he did. So he tells the king many things, and as I said in the past few episodes, we've been talking about it. This is the latest version of that, and this is perhaps the heaviest dose of all. And remember, he's talking to a king, and here's this guy who is dirty, ragged, got nothing on. He's lecturing a king. My dear King Rahugana, he says, the living entity wanders on the path of the material world, which is very difficult and full of suffering. Being captivated by the spell of illusion, Maya, the living entity can see only 3 things. Auspicious, that which he likes. Inauspicious, that which he doesn't like. And mixed, meaning there are some things you like and don't like at the same time, right? But there's only 3 things we see, and that's the point he's making. We see that which we like, that which we don't like, because our mind is always operating in this dualistic fashion. It's always telling us what is good, what is bad, what is right, what is wrong. I like this, I don't like this. So essentially saying, that which is good, that which is bad, that you like, that which you don't like, and mix some things you like and don't like at the same time. I may like something about a person, but not something else about them. like that. So he says the living entity is captivated by the spell of illusion. Illusion is the illusion of this world, which in that movie, The Matrix, that's what they called it. And in that illusion, so try to understand this illusion. Everything about what we see and experience here is an illusion. The Vedas define it like this, that that which is eternal is that which is real. What is eternal? Energy is eternal, not matter. Matter will change constantly. And that which is temporary is that which is an illusion. So temporary means matter, and eternal means energy. Energy is eternal. And therefore that is reality. Now, isn't that completely the opposite of how we think? We think matter is real, and things like the soul and energy. Well, now we're starting to understand energy a bit more ever since Einstein and Max Planck and the quantum mechanics, all that world opened up to us. We're starting to understand it a little better. But those very people pointed out the same thing, that what we see around here isn't what it seems to be. This is an illusion. That's what the ancients thousands of years ago called Maya. This is in the Vedic times, 5,000 years ago. They understood quantum mechanics in a way scientists are still grappling with. So Judd continues, the more a person gets of what he likes or desires, he works hard, very hard, day and night. The more you get it, the harder you work, because you're now feeling rewarded for your, because you're getting what you like. However, he cannot really achieve happiness within this material world. Now, guess why? Why can a person not achieve happiness within this world? Because it's an illusion, because it's false. See? And because it's false, no matter how much of it you get, it doesn't satisfy. It's like when you go and you eat sugar candy of some kind, or you go and get candy floss. It's a lot of fluff, but there's no substance to it. There's no nutrition to it. It does not satisfy the body. It leaves you thirsty, wanting more. And that's what the nature of this world is. Ted continues, he says, he is exactly like a merchant. Now he begins this whole analogy of a merchant who enters a forest. He's going to talk about the analogy of this world as a forest. So bear with this analogy and I'll help you break it up to understand it more deeply. It is very profound and very hard-hitting. So if you find yourself feeling a little, no, I can't take this, it's a little too much, it's too heavy, it's too hard, trust me, that's the ego getting activated. And if you can sit through that, and if you can patiently listen to his point of view, you're going to walk away this evening from some very profound learnings. So Judd says, he is exactly like a merchant who enters a forest to acquire some articles to sell later for profit. In this forest of material existence, there are 6 very powerful plunderers who misguide him and steal his money. So those 6 powerful plunderers are for us, because we are the ones walking into the forest of material existence, like that merchant he's talking about. And for us, the 6 powerful plunderers are the 5 senses and the mind. And they plunder our intelligence. They plunder our life. They rob us of our energy. And they leave us sucked out and dry. As I was saying earlier, we're constantly trying to appease this master within our head, our mind, ego, and our senses. Like tigers, jackals, and other ferocious animals in a forest, they are ready to take away a lamb from the custody of its protector. In much the same way, family members enter the heart of the merchant and plunder him in so many ways. So he's comparing the tigers and jackals who may attack a lamb, right, in the forest. He's comparing family members to that tiger who comes and plunders everything that we work so hard for. The merchant has his intelligence victimized by home, wealth, relatives, and so forth, runs from one place to another in search of success. Sometimes his eyes are covered by the dust of a whirlwind. That is to say, in his lust, he is captivated by the beauty of his wife, especially during her menstrual period. Thus his eyes are blinded and he cannot see where to go or what he is doing. So he's talking about attraction and how attraction is so deeply built into our body, mind, organism that it keeps us chasing the object of desire. Whether it is you're married or you're not married, either way, whoever is your object of attraction is what you're going to be chasing. And if you can appease that being, that person, you're going to feel that you're successful. If you can provide that person a home and wealth and so on, then you're going to feel like you achieved, you made it. And the world will recognize you as such. But what really is happening is your life energy, your time, everything is being spent on this pursuit. Jad Bharat continues, in this forest, the conditioned soul is always disturbed by cruelly biting mosquitoes. That is an analogy for envious people. Sometimes he sees an imaginary palace in the forest, and sometimes he is bewildered by a fleeting fiend or ghost, which appears like a meteor in the sky. So again, we all have these dreams that we see, and these things that we want, and they are compared here to an imaginary palace in the sky. Like castles in the sky, like we make up all these fantasies and desires and dreams, and then we chase them. If it weren't for us making up all that stuff and all those desires, we wouldn't be chasing them. We wouldn't be spending all our time and energy in that direction. Maybe we'd have a little extra time for our spiritual growth. And then he talks, of course, about envious people who are like cruelly biting mosquitoes. And if ever you've been around mosquitoes, you know how they can be, especially if you're trying to sleep. Now here's a person who is indeed trying to sleep in his illusion. These envious people, especially if you've got something, if you've achieved something, if you have a big house or some fancy stuff, then now there are all these envious people around you who want to have what you've got. Wandering in the forest of the material world, the conditioned soul sometimes hears an invisible cricket making harsh sounds, and his ears become very much aggrieved. Sometimes his heart is pained by the sounds of owls, which are just like the harsh words of his enemies. Sometimes he takes shelter of a tree that has no fruits or flowers. He approaches such a tree due to his strong appetite, and thus he suffers. He would like to acquire water, but he is simply illusioned by a mirage and runs after it. I think you'll understand the analogy of the mirage, but the part about the harsh sounds of owls that he's talking about, that is the harsh words of enemies. And that again, so there's so many different kinds of sufferings we have in this world, so many things that trouble us and that we try to overcome. And yes, you may have all these different tools. I'm going to set boundaries with these people and I'm going to teach them a lesson or whatever it might be. But these are all part of the package of material existence. And we've invested our time and energy into making this world beautiful or perfect or incredible. And it can't be. It can't be because there's too many variables. Too many variables. And so we've got to look at where we want to really invest our energy and our time. If it is in trying to make the world a better place, I used to think, I want to make the world a better place. It sounded like such a noble idea. And I realized the world will never be a better place. You can't make 8 billion people better. They're all on their own spiritual journey. They're all here to experience various things, and much of it is to be that which they're not. All of us are beautiful, incredible souls. And yet in this journey, because of our mind and because of our ego and because of our desires and because of our karma, we are propelled in so many different directions. And often those directions are to get the most you can for yourself at the cost of others. And so there are others who are suffering because of us. Now, if you want to make the world a better place, that means 8 billion people would have to take that decision. If 1 or 2 or 10 or 100 or 1,000 did that, we'd get somewhere. And it's better somewhere than nowhere, yes. But we have to be real about this. The world will go on as it is. You can make your small little community, and that's a wonderful and noble thing. And I admire that, and I think we should all do that. However, we also need to keep our expectations in check and recognize that the world is what it is. There will always be critics, there will always be envious people, there will always be people who will, look down on you, and no matter how much you try to appease them, they will find fault in you. And the fault is not really in you, the fault is mostly in them. There's a saying, wrongdoer, fault finder, one and the same. So what a person sees in you lies in them. And that's a very important part to understand. What you see in others, you see it only because it's in you. You see evil, you see ugliness, you see nastiness, you see meanness. It's in you. You may try to push it down, you may try to suppress it, but you would not be so hassled by it, you would not be so troubled by it unless it was in you. Those who are truly enlightened and beyond these things, it doesn't bother them. You can be mean, you can be nasty. This king, Rahugana, was nasty with Jad Bharat. What did he do? He gave him guidance, he gave him wisdom, he enlightened him. He didn't take offense. Like, okay, big deal. You want to call me an idiot? You want to call me a fool? Okay, fine, no problem. That doesn't bother me. There's no ego here that's trying to defend itself. He continues, sometimes the conditioned soul jumps into a shallow river. So if you have been in a shallow river or a shallow pool of water, hoping to get relief from the heat, but instead breaks his bones. Just like when he's trying to get help from friends and family, sometimes, you're in a tough spot and you try to get help from them and they don't show up and you're disappointed and you're hurt and your expectations are shattered, especially when you need them. Sometimes you do get help, but so often not. Sometimes the people you count on the most aren't there for you. Sometimes you thought someone is your friend, but in fact they were not. Sometimes you thought someone was your family and it turned out they were not. I'm not saying in all cases, but often enough. Sometimes he suffers from the burning heat of household life, which is like a forest fire, filled with conflict and complaints. And sometimes he becomes sad to have his wealth, which is as dear as his life, when it is plundered by kings, or in our case, the government, in the name of heavy income taxes, right? Does it not make you sad to know that a huge part of your income, thousands and thousands of dollars, tens of thousands maybe if you're wealthy, goes to the government, money that you worked hard for? Srila Prabhupada in the Bhagavatam writes, no one wants to be unhappy in worldly life, yet unhappiness and distress are forced on everyone. In the 12th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is said that in Kali Yuga is the times that we live in now, the age that we live in now, known as the age of quarrel, hypocrisy, and dissension, Kali Yuga. It says in Kali Yuga, the government will levy taxes without reciprocally benefiting the citizens. So the whole idea of the government taking taxes from us is that they will provide a good life. They will take care of the roads, they will take care of our safety, they will make sure that things run smoothly in our cities. But as time is going by, we're seeing less and less of that happen. We're seeing more and more of the very agents who are supposed to protect us harming us. We're starting to see things like police brutality. We're starting to see where governments tax unnecessarily in some countries more than others. We're seeing where certain systems that were set up to help us when we get older, like Social Security and so on, are being threatened and may be pulled away from us. We don't know how far and how bad this gets. But the prediction of seers and prophets at the time, 5,000 years ago, when they were looking at this current time and the times to come ahead of us, this is what they were seeing. That the government will levy taxes without reciprocally benefiting the citizens. There will be a shortage of rain, therefore a scarcity of food will arise. And right now those predictions are very much on the table. With global warming, with the increase of population, The predictions are we'll go up to 10 billion people on the planet, and there will not be enough food to feed everyone, especially the kind of food we're eating. When you eat meat and things like that, it takes up so much of resources. You can't feed the planet like that. But who cares, right? We just want our sense enjoyment. We want to enjoy now. Really, that's all there is. So, and he says further that the citizens will be very much harassed by government taxation. So citizens will abandon their attempts to lead a peaceful life, will leave their homes and go to the forest in disappointment. So this is, of course, predictions for the future, but some people are already starting to think like that. Jad Bharat continues, sometimes being defeated or plundered by a superior powerful force, a living entity loses all his possessions. It could be bankruptcy, it could be, change in the economy, it could be joblessness, it could be so many situations where you lose all your possessions. He then becomes very morose, laments his loss, and sometimes becomes unconscious. Sometimes he imagines or visualizes various things, dreams, fantasies in which he desires to live happily with his family members and riches, and he thinks himself fully satiated if this is possible. But such so-called happiness continues only for a moment. All these people who talk of the law of attraction, I don't know if you've noticed, most of them are quite broke. They don't have a lot of money. But, it's wonderful to have dreams. It's wonderful. They keep you nice and satiated. They keep you placated. They keep you feeling good. Yeah, and then smoke a little pot on top of that and have a little, alcohol there with it. And you don't mind your terrible existence, and you'll keep on dreaming of a better life. And the law of attraction will somehow bring you all that you desire. So the fact is, life is hard and is full of suffering. We need to learn to accept that. When we accept it, things become easier. I don't mean that the world changes. I mean our attitude changes. Srila Prabhupada writes again in the Bhagavatam, he says, the happiness of family life, friends, and society is compared to a drop of water in the scorching desert. If we want to reduce the desert temperature, we need huge amounts of water. So if the happiness that we get from family life, friends, and society is compared to a drop of water in a scorching desert, and now we want to reduce the desert temperature, we need huge amounts of water, millions and millions of gallons. What effect will one drop have? Meaning the suffering of this world is so great, the different trials and tribulations and things that we have to endure are so much that the little pleasures that we get are few and far between. I mean, think about it. 8 hours you work in a day. Then you spend an hour or two commuting, going to and from work. After that, you have very little energy to enjoy. You just want to sit down in front of the TV. And so what are you doing in front of the TV? You're not really enjoying. You're letting something else entertain you. But how much are you enjoying? Is this the greatest level of enjoyment that we are capable of? Is this what we worked for all day, only to come back and be so exhausted and so drained? No. So that's what he means. What effect will one drop have when in fact you need millions and millions of gallons of water to be able to quench the fire of the desert, to quench the fire of material existence? Prabhupada writes, water certainly has value, but one drop of water cannot reduce the heat of the desert. In this material world, everyone is ambitious. The heat is very scorching. What will an imaginary castle in the air do to help? The entire material world is busy trying to attain happiness because happiness is the prerogative of the living being. This is an important part to understand. Happiness is the prerogative of the living being. It is your birthright. It is not just your right. It's much deeper than that. It is who you are. It is the nature of your soul. It is the nature of your true self. Happiness, the soul is Sat Chit Ananda. It is eternal. That means it does not die. It has no fear of death. It is Chit, it is conscious. Conscious meaning not just conscious as in I'm awake, I'm conscious. No, conscious as in it sees things as they are. It feels alive. There is an aliveness within us. And there are times in our life when we have felt that aliveness. Perhaps you're doing something you really enjoy. Maybe you're dancing or you're hiking or you're out in nature or something that you're passionate about. And for moments you begin to feel this soaring bliss coming from within you. It's coming from your soul. You've just found a way to activate it. It doesn't mean that that activity is so great. It's the soul which is shining through in that moment. So that is Chit. That is your true consciousness shining through. And the soul is Sat Chit Ananda. Ananda means blissful. Bliss is very different than happiness. Happiness of this world has a cause. Something happened, therefore now I am happy. But bliss or Ananda, Ananda arises for no cause. It has no reason. It just is the nature of who you are. It is the nature of the ultimate reality. It is the nature of God. And because it is the nature of God, it doesn't need a cause. It just is. Whenever you touch that place, that's what you feel. Like when you touch water, you will feel wetness. When you touch fire, you will feel hurt and maybe something burning you. But when you touch the soul, you will feel bliss. So he continues. The entire Prabhupada is speaking this in the purport. The entire material world is busy trying to attain happiness because happiness is the prerogative of the living being. Unfortunately, due to failing in contact with the material world, the living entity simply struggles for existence. Even if one becomes happy for a while, a very powerful enemy, known as time, may plunder everything. Sometimes the merchant, so Jad Bharat continues, sometimes the merchant in the forest wants to climb the hills and mountains, but due to insufficient footwear, his feet are pricked by small stone fragments and by thorns on the mountain. Being pricked by them, he becomes very aggrieved. Sometimes a person who is very attached to his family becomes overwhelmed with hunger due to miserable conditions. Hunger can be, in this case, hunger for pleasure, hunger for peace. Sometimes you go home and the kids are making such a racket and you want some peace. And there isn't any. Sometimes you go home and your partner is nagging you and is telling you didn't do this and you should have done that. And what is wrong with you? And so because of these miserable conditions, one becomes furious with his family members. The conditioned soul in the material forest is sometimes swallowed by a python and crushed. At such a time, he is left lying in the forest like a dead person, devoid of consciousness and knowledge. Sometimes other poisonous snakes bite him. Being blind to his consciousness, he falls down into a dark well of hellish life with no hope of being rescued. So this python that he's talking about is time that swallows us up. Time devours us, like a python swallowing a person, and just leaves us for dead at the end of it all. And because we don't have any consciousness and knowledge, we continue not realizing how to get out, not realizing how to be free, and we fall into what he calls here a dark well of hellish life with no hope of being rescued. We have no idea, how can I become free of suffering? How do I become free of death? How do I become free of old age? How do I become free of all these problems in the world? The problem is that we're trying to solve the problem, but the problem cannot be solved. Because if you solve one problem, another problem comes up, and you solve that problem, another problem comes up. Like they call that the example of the 1,000-headed hydra, a particular serpent, and we tried to kill it, then another head. You knocked off one head, the other head came up. Knocked off another head, another head, another head, another head. Same with Ravan. Ravan, when Ram tried to kill him, you knocked off one head of his, it grew back, and another one was, there were 9 others. So you couldn't destroy Ravan as a result of that. And it is the same with time. Time doesn't wait for us. Time keeps on finding ways in which to, like poisonous snakes biting, keeps on finding ways to come at us, sometimes through old age, sometimes through the wrinkling of our skin, sometimes through the difficulty in walking as we get older, sometimes the difficulty in digesting, so many problems, right? And then we try to fix them instead of realizing, hey, this is the nature of this world. Let me find out what else is possible. There is another world waiting for me. There is a different realm of consciousness waiting for me, and I need to awaken to that. Judd continues, sometimes in order to have a little insignificant sex enjoyment, one searches after a debauched partner, man, woman, whatever. In this attempt, one is insulted and chastised by, let's say, the other person has already got a lover or a husband or a wife, right? Or friends, right? And then they might come and insult you. This is like going, like a bee going to take honey from a beehive and being attacked. Sorry. This is like going to a beehive to take honey and being attacked by the bees. Sometimes after spending lots of money, one, you think, now I have a lot of money, I'm rich, I'm wealthy. Oh, I can have an affair. I can have another person on the side, like I got a wife at home, but yeah, there's this other woman in the office. So sometimes when a person has made a lot of money, has a lot of fame, has a lot of power, they may have an affair with someone else for extra sensual enjoyment. Unfortunately, the object of enjoyment may fall for another debauchee or leave at any time. Sometimes the living entity is busy counteracting the natural disturbances of freezing cold, scorching heat, strong wind, excessive rainfall, and so forth. When he is unable to do so, he becomes very unhappy. So imagine if you're out in if your air conditioning stops working, or if you're out in a really cold place or a really hot place, and then you complain about the weather. Isn't it? People complain about the weather a lot. Oh, it's so hot these days. Oh my God, we're having a heat wave. And I often tell them, man, you haven't been where I've been. If you'd been in India, you'd say, oh, this is nothing. You're 30 degrees centigrade or 90 degree Fahrenheit is like, it's a breeze here. Try being in 120 degrees Fahrenheit or 45 degrees centigrade. Then you'll know what hot is. And even there, I would practice tolerating that. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that happiness and distress, heat and cold, are like winter and summer seasons, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. So, Judd continues, when he is unable to counteract these forces of nature, he becomes very unhappy. Sometimes he is cheated in business transactions, one after another. In this way, by cheating other living entities, create enmity amongst themselves. So he says, when someone cheats you, then they become your enemy, right? And then you might cheat somebody else and they become your enemy, and they might cheat you, and you this cycle goes on. On the forest path of material existence, sometimes a person is without wealth, and due to this does not have a proper home, bed, or sitting place, nor proper family enjoyment. He therefore goes to get help in the form of money from others. But when his desires are not fulfilled, he may resort to stealing the property of others. He may then be caught and imprisoned and be insulted in society. Now we see a lot of this happening now, especially as you see the homeless populations increasing, especially as you see that when somebody offered free PlayStations in New York, thousands of people converged. When they couldn't get those PlayStations, they started damaging cars and property and shops and what have you, angry that they could not get this freebie that they wanted. So much desire to have these things. When you can't get them, there's so much frustration that you end up doing illegal and criminal things. Now, it's not, you may say it's the fault of the person who's doing this, of course, but it's also the fault of a society that makes this the summum bonum of life, that makes it the ultimate aim of life. Judd says, due to monetary transactions, relationships become very strained and end in enmity. So you'll often see this in families. You'll see a lot of bickering. In fact, it's said that the number one cause of arguments between couples is around finances and, of course, chores. But these are the two big topics, basically. Monetary transactions amongst family members, like sometimes when a parent dies, and you'll find the siblings all squabbling over over the inheritance. You'll find so many different ways in which people turn money as a way to be able to make enemies out of each other and to end relationships or to spoil relationships. Sometimes a husband and wife walk on the path of material progress, and to maintain their relationship, they work very hard. Sometimes, due to perceived scarcity of money, they may quarrel. On the path of material life, one becomes attached to his newly born children and wanders the path of material progress. Then, even after the death of his parents, he does not know how to get out of his entanglement in this world, even till the moment of death. What he's saying is, you get very enamored. You have this beautiful partner, then you have these children. Now you have this success. You're making all kinds of money. You're having all kinds of wonderful things. And yet, even though you see, let's say, your pet animals first, they might be the earliest to die, your cat or dog. Then there'll be your parents who will die. There'll be your friends who will die. There'll be family members who will die. And yet, we do not think we will die. King Yudhishthir, when he was asked, what is the most incredible thing that you've ever come across in this world, in your whole journey of life? King Yudhishthir, this highly enlightened king, the eldest of the Pandavas brothers, they were friends of Krishna. So when he was asked, what is the most incredible thing you've come across? And he says, the most incredible thing is that we see people die every single day, and yet we think, I will not die. Or at least we live in such a way as if we will not die, as if it will not come to us. The question is, if we will die, and we will, there is no other thing more certain in life than death. It is the most certain thing. If that is so certain, then wouldn't you prepare for it? Like if you know that your taxes are due by a certain time, would you not prepare for it? If you know that your rent is due on a certain day, would you not prepare for it? If you know that if you don't pay your electric bill, your electricity is going to be cut off, would you not pay for it? If your fridge were empty, would you not prepare for it by going out and getting some groceries? We do this all the time. And yet, when it comes to the topic of death, which is more certain than anything else, we don't want to think about it and we don't want to prepare. We put our head into the ground like an ostrich burying its head under the sand or a rabbit that closes its eyes. We pretend. It's amazing. Jad continues, there are many political and social heroes who have conquered great enemies, yet due to their ignorance in believing that the land is theirs, they fight one another and lay down their lives in battle. They are unable to take up the path of spiritual realization. So again, we're talking about social, political heroes, even, army people, veterans, so on and so forth, not necessarily taking up the path of spiritual realization. Sometimes the living entity in the forest of material existence takes shelter of creepers. Creepers meaning like the arms of a partner. You want some solace, you want some soothing, you want someone who you can just fall into their arms and feel safe. And he desires to hear the chirping of the birds in those creepers. That's an analogy for the sweet voice of your partner. Being afraid of roaring lions in the forest. What is that roaring lion? Imminent death. He makes friends with cranes, herons, and vultures. And this is an analogy for bogus swamis, yogis, incarnations, pretenders, cheaters, priests, and preachers. All kinds of people who come your way and say, I have the answer for you. I will show you the way. The point is, no one needs to save you, and no one needs to show you the way, and no one needs to fix your problems. You need to do that for you. And that's not something anybody wants to hear. This message that Jad Bharat is giving, you will never hear them say such things. This can only be said by one who has no fear and wants nothing out of you. Jad says, being cheated by them, the living entity in the forest of the material world tries to give up their association and seeks the association of real devotees. So once he realizes these people are cheaters and they're taking him for a ride, then he tries to seek out real devotees of God, but due to misfortune cannot follow their instructions because the devotees are asking you some really heavy stuff. They're telling you like, hey, snap out of it, man. Wake up. Wake up. Take a look at the reality of how things are. Realize that this world is full of suffering and you can't change that. And going on trying to fix things. So they don't want to hear that. You've got to get up early. You've got to chant the names of God. You've got to start tuning your mind in a different direction. And they don't want to hear that. So what do? They then go back again into their material existence. So he says here, he then once again returns to the association of monkeys. who are simply interested in sense gratification. He derives satisfaction by associating with them, by enjoying sex and intoxication. In this way, he spoils the valuable gift of life. So why does he call them monkeys, by the way? Because monkeys love sex. And I'm not saying sex is bad or good, but if that's the goal of life, and if that's what you're making, the pursuit of happiness is about how to get as much as possible, then you're definitely off track. A monkey can do that better than you. And if this is hard truth, right? Then he says, like a monkey, the living entity jumps from one branch to another, remaining in the tree of household life without any profit. So one branch to the other could be one partner to another, from one kind of pleasure to another, right? Remaining in the tree of household life without any profit. He's kicked by his wife just like a he-ass. So just like, sometimes when the donkey goes to have sex with the male donkey goes to have sex with this female donkey, sometimes she kicks him, right? So he compares in the same way. Unable to gain release from suffering, he remains helplessly in that position. Sometimes he falls victim to an incurable disease, which is like falling into a mountain cave. He becomes afraid of death, which is like the elephant in the back of that cave, and he remains stranded, gasping at the twigs and branches of a creeper. That is, meaning longing for the affection of his partner. Now, you might feel, oh my God, this is such a negative picture he's painting. He is giving you the worst possible scenarios. And true. The purpose of an enlightened being is to wake us up. The purpose of a guru or a true teacher who wants to wake us up is to show us the reality of things without mincing words, without sugarcoating it. And that's what he's doing here. See, one who wants popularity will sugarcoat it. One who wants you to approve of them or wants you to like them will never tell you the truth. But one who tells you the truth and says it like it is, it's hard to hear. And so is this. This is hard to hear, right? But if you're finding it hard, take it. It's like a bitter pill. And that bitter pill is what it takes for us to wake up and to see the nature of reality. It's not about being pessimistic or optimistic. It's about waking up, recognizing that the nightmare you've been living is only because your mind has spun an illusion and you've been caught in that illusion, like a dream, like a nightmare. And the only way to get out of the nightmare is to wake up. Thus, under the spell of the Lord's material energy, he continues to loiter in the forest of material existence. He does not discover his real interest even at the point of death. Now, notice something very important. He refers to this as God's material energy. Everything is God's energy, and this world is also made of the energy of God. Spirit is the spiritual energy, the internal energy of God. Spirit meaning the soul, spirit meaning God, right? In the spiritual world. They're all made of that internal energy, the spiritual energy. The material energy is referred to as the external energy. So it's different. It is covered. It is covered. That means there is energy, but that energy is covered by matter. People say, oh, this world is made of energy. Yeah, right. What is that energy? You can feel this energy, the energy of this world, simply by tuning into it, just by being present, especially if you are in nature. You can feel it. It's palpable. The energy behind the trees, the energy behind the mountains, the energy behind the wind and the sun. It's palpable. And it'll leave you uplifted and feeling inspired and joyful inside. It'll feel you so energized. That energy is God. Well, it's the energy of God. It's not God personified, but it's the energy of God. It's that representation. So he says, my dear King Rahugana, you are also a victim of the external energy, means the material energy, being situated on the path of attraction to material pleasure, so that you may become an equal friend to all living entities. This is the symptom, by the way, of an enlightened being, that they are an equal friend to all living entities. They do not see one as higher or lower, better or worse. He says, so that you may become an equal friend to all living entities, I now advise you to give up your kingly position and the rod by which you punish criminals. Give up attraction to sense objects and take up the sword of knowledge, sharpened by devotion to God. Then you will be able to cut the hard knot of illusory energy or Maya and cross to the other side of the ocean of nescience. Nescience means ignorance, darkness. King Rahugana said, this birth as a human being is the best of all. Please note this. This birth as a human being is the best of all. He explains why. This is the king replying now. Even birth among the demigods in the heavenly planets is not as glorious as birth as a human being on this earth. See, it is said that the demigods on the heavenly planets have tremendous amounts of pleasure and live long lives and have beautiful bodies. They're not these green alien creatures that Hollywood talks about. But I mean, even on this earth, we see, certain countries have a very heavenly existence. People are rich, people are beautiful, people have big houses, people have incredible lives, and other people are very poor. So you can say there's heavenly and hellish places even on this earth. And so it is spoken of in the Vedas, at least, there are heavenly planets and hellish planets, even in this universe. So he says, even birth among the demigods in the heavenly planets is not as glorious as birth as a human being on this earth. What is the use of the exalted position of a demigod? In the heavenly planets, due to profuse material comforts, there is no possibility of associating with the devotees of God. It is not at all wonderful that simply by being covered by the dust of your lotus feet, so now he's telling Jad Bharat, who was this enlightened being, simply by being covered by the dust of your lotus feet, one immediately attains the platform of pure devotion to God or Krishna, which is not available even to the great demigods. By associating with you just for a moment, I am now freed from all argument, false prestige, and lack of determination, which are the roots of entanglement in the material world. Now I am free from all these problems. This is such a beautiful statement. I remember the time where I had been seeking for so many years, and when I came across these statements, I felt the same thing. Like this freedom, like this load was lifted off. I wanted to know, I wanted to know, seeking. When I finally heard these things, it was like a load was lifted, and I felt just so elated. It was such an incredible feeling. So King Rahugana says, I offer my respectful obeisances unto great personalities, whether they walk on the earth's surface as children, young boys, avadhutas, like Jad Bharat, or great Brahmins. Even if they are hidden under different guises, I offer my respects to all of them. By their mercy, may there be good fortune in the royal dynasties that are always offending them, like he did. Then it goes on to talk about how Jad Bharat experienced some waves of dissatisfaction in his mind due to his being insulted by the king. That was in the beginning of this whole conversation. This king who had made him carry his palanquin, but Jad neglected this wave of dissatisfaction that was moving through him, neglected this wave, and his heart became calm and quiet like an ocean. So in here is hidden a very powerful process of emotional release. That when you experience an emotion coming to you, you can either latch on to it and hold it and then be really offended and hurt and angry and upset, or you can let it go. Let it go. Truly let it go. Realizing that it's coming from your mind, that is your mind, your ego has made up something. There's probably no truth in it, and you can let it go. So he neglected this wave of dissatisfaction that was arising. So even as an enlightened being, these things are there because you have a mind and an ego, right? And so that ego is going, well, what do you mean? How can you let go of this king? He upset you. He insulted you. You got to take some revenge. You got to tell him. You got to be hurt with it. You got to be angry at him. No. Right? Although King Rahugana had insulted him, being a Vaishnava, a devotee of God, he was naturally very kind-hearted. And he forgot the insult because King Rahugana pitifully begged pardon at his lotus feet. After this, he began to wander all over the earth just as before. That is, Jad Bharat. King Rahugana, due to having taken shelter of a great devotee, gave up the bodily conception completely. Bodily conception means this identification with this body, the identity of being a king, the identity of being this royal personality. King Parikshit then told Shukdev Goswami, O great devotee sage, you are omniscient, you have very nicely described the position of the conditioned soul who is compared to the merchant in the forest. From these instructions, intelligent people can understand that the senses of a person in the bodily concept of like are like rogues and thieves in that forest, and one's family are like jackals and other ferocious animals. However, it is not very easy for the unintelligent to understand the purport of this story. Because it is difficult to extricate the exact meaning from the allegory, I therefore request your holiness to give the direct meaning. So in the next episode, we will have Shukdev explaining to the king, Parikshit, the deeper meaning of this whole allegory. For now, I think we've reached the end of our time here today, and I'm going to open things up to questions. If you have any questions, please write them down in the chat or the comments. If you're here live on either Facebook or LinkedIn or YouTube or Zoom, please write down your questions in the chat, and I will take it up. And if you're on Zoom and you'd like to come on, just let me know, and I'll be happy to have you on. You can ask me the question face to face. All right, let's get into some questions. Seely writes, paradoxical, we are attracted to this world to fulfill our dharma or karma for the soul to grow or stumble, yet the goal seems to escape that from which we desired. All right, let's think about this. We are attracted to the world to fulfill our dharma or karma for the soul to grow or stumble. Okay? Yet the goal seems to be to escape from that which we desired. Interestingly put. I appreciate how you've written this, almost poetic. The reality is this. We are given options. Love is never forced. You see, we have a relationship with God, with the absolute truth, with the Supreme Being. And that relationship cannot be forced. So we are given, because we come from the light, we come from a place that is only God. We cannot be forced to love God. We must choose God. And so to choose something, you must be given lots of choices. Like when you go to a supermarket, if there was only one brand, there was only one product, and that's all. And I said, now this is the product, and now choose it. This is not a choice. There is only one thing. What can I choose? I have no choice except that, right? If there was one person in the world that you had to marry, and that was the only person given to you, then there's no choice. Then you're forced. So love cannot be forced. You must be able to choose, and you must have lots of variety to choose. So you've been given all kinds of possibilities, things that you can be. You can be anything from a king, or a politician, or a business person, or an astronaut, or a pauper, whatever you want to be. You can have, and you can do anything you want in this world. And everything you do will have its consequences. You'll have the karma attached to it. The question is, you're also being given information about the divine, about God, about Krishna. When will you choose that? That remains to be seen. And you have no worry, no hurry. You have millions of lifetimes. Take your time. You will not be forced. You can keep on living the dream. You can keep on living the illusion. And the more you live in that illusion, the more it torments you. But the more you step away from it and become identified with the soul and with God, the more free you become from the suffering of this world. Why do you become free? Because your identification has changed. See, when a person's under anesthesia, they're no longer able to feel the suffering of this body. Their nerves and their connection between the mind. The suffering is actually here in the mind. It's not in the body. The body doesn't feel pain. You think you do, but that's because you have nerves running all through your body. The suffering is really in the mind. The mind feels the pain, transmits it down to the body so that you may take care of that wound or that problem. It's a messaging system. Now, the point I'm trying to get at is the suffering, all suffering, is here in the mind. When you've shifted your attention away from the mind and you've become identified with the soul and the soul with God, there is no more suffering because you have cut off the very thing that caused the suffering. You see, a person like Jad Bharat, if you notice, had no possessions, had no food, had nothing, not even respect. He was looked down upon by everybody. He was thought of as being an idiot. He was thought of as being mad. Didn't care. Because his mind wasn't in the play. His mind was somewhere else. His mind was with God. And because he was so fixed on that, he didn't feel anything about the world. He didn't feel the torment of the physical world or the emotional reaction to the people of the world. To him, there was no consequence. Of just no matter. It didn't matter. As I roam through the forest of my life, I am grateful for all that and those with me. Yes, we can understand that gratitude. Grateful for the life we have, and then also recognize the source of this life. Because if you recognize who granted this life, how come this life was given to us, what is the connection, then we begin to understand that this gift was given to us. And there is something that the giver would like from us. You know, they say, don't just ask what you want. What was that JFK said? Don't ask what you want from your country. Ask what don't ask what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. So don't just keep asking God, give me this, God, give me that, God, give me that. Don't just keep taking. Being grateful is the first step. But also ask further, what can I do for you? How can I serve you? And the greatest way to serve God is to serve those who are beloved of God. Serve them. Care for them. That could be anyone. It could be a child. It could be an animal. They're all beloved of God. But you have to do it in that spirit. In that spirit. That's important. Have that relationship with God. Recognize that I do this for you. Everything I do it for you. And when it's in that spirit, you will have reestablished your relationship, your love for God. There is nothing more ecstatic, nothing more joyous, nothing more satisfying to the heart than that feeling. Why? Because that's who we are. It's like when you take a fish and you put it back in water, it stops fluttering. It's like fluttering the whole time. It's about to die. It's suffocating. If you've ever seen the fish being pulled out of the water, it's awful to watch it. And then when you put it back in the water, it's suddenly at ease. And it's the same thing that happens. We're struggling in this world, struggling to survive, struggling like a fish out of water because we are out of our water. And when you put us back into that place, in that alignment with God, where we are in love with God, where we are connected to God, where we're serving God, suddenly there's ease, there's grace. And now we're able to live from a life where the things of the world do not bother us the way they do the average person. And people look at you when you're there and they say, something wrong with you. Yes, there is something wrong with you. You've cut off, you've disconnected from this. It's not bothering you anymore. Not because you're avoiding it. It's not because like some spiritual bypass, as people say, but it's because you've truly changed your identification from matter to spirit. You've understood that I'm a soul. And now I'm going to live from that place. That the things of the ego, the things of the mind, and the things of the body are not me. My body is having a problem. My mind is having a problem. My ego is having a problem. You can always label it as such, and you can identify it, but you don't have to buy into it. You don't have to believe it. And you don't have to keep on pandering to it. Anyone else have any questions? Thank you, Silly. Thank you so much. Thank you for your gratitude. Thank you for all your love. Thank you for being here week after week. Deeply appreciate you and all of those who are joining in. Does anyone else have any further questions? Anything you'd like to know? Anamika, would you like to write your question or would you like to come on? I can bring you on. But I've forgotten how to do it now. Just write it down, please. I'm sorry, I have forgotten how to. Anamika, go ahead, write your question down, please. Oh, I think I know what to do. Okay, Anamika, you can come in now. I'll have you speak. Go ahead, say something.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I just tried typing up the question into the chat.
It's okay. Go ahead, say it.
Yeah, I know. I said that how can one take the teachings of this session and relate it to the life of a parent? Meaning, especially in a situation when the child is exhibiting some behavior which is, hurtful, or disrespectful, or just not necessarily, for their. I mean, as a parent, you have to correct it, right? And I understand this is all an illusion, but how do you grow? Yeah.
It's an illusion. That doesn't mean. So when Jad Bharat was being spoken about very rudely by the king, he confronted him. He called him out. He didn't just, sit down, lay back, just let the king go on and on and on. He called the king out. He says, you're speaking, like Krishna says to Arjuna, while speaking learned words, you are mourning for what is not worthy of grief. So he calls him out, right? So you've sometimes got to take a stand, or you've got to set a boundary with somebody and let them know that what they're doing is not acceptable, is not okay. So when it comes to children especially, they do need boundaries, and they do need to know what is possible, what the limits are, and what's okay and what's not okay. And sometimes it has to be very firmly, not angrily, not from a place of punishing, but very firmly the boundaries need to be established. And very often, if you're a kind-hearted person, it's hard to do because we're not used to that. We're not used to, we want to be kind, we want to be loving, we want to be sweet, but sometimes we need to know how to set boundaries. If the issue is more complicated, of course, I'd have to discuss it with you individually and understand it deeper. But yeah, I mean, there are the ways of the world, and you've got to be able to deal with people in the world according to the ways of the world. You can't confuse these spiritual and, material things. Everything has its place. Here he's talking about really the attachment to the world that causes us to suffer. And as a parent, you understand that. If your child, for example, is not obeying you, is not listening to you, and you're not able to get them to cooperate or do the things you want them to do, then there is suffering in that. And that's another one of the sufferings that, like Jad Bharat is talking about, how this works. So then let that be a moment for your own spiritual realization that there is no happiness in this world, that my child is here on his own journey, and I have to be able to do the best I can, and that's all I can do. Does it make any sense?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
It was a wonderful session.
You're welcome. I'll see you guys next week. This is time for us to wind up. And Shri Krishna, Hare Krishna. And I'll see you next week. Bye. Thank you for being here. Have a good night, everyone.